Good morning. Hopefully I'm not going to get decimated today by wind. I shot this video last night. It didn't take, and I'm going to try again. I've been trying to shoot this video for weeks. I've been failing. This is a really important video to me. This is number 5 on my Celtic videos, and this is about the conquest of Gaul. Okay, there's two main characters in today's show. One is named Julius Caesar. The other is named Vercingetorix, who is the Celtic chieftain, or Vercingetorix is most people incorrectly pronounce it, but he was the Celtic chieftain that almost united Gaul, did unite Gaul, and almost defeated the Romans, but didn't. But anyway, kind of ruining the surprise for you. But we're doing the Celts. I gotta finish this series. I want to start focusing on Christmas shows. Today probably will be the last Celtic video until the holidays are over. So, supposedly that bust, there's a face of a guy up there, right above those eagles. That's one of my uncles, apparently. And all right, anyways, enough about that. All right, so when we last left off, I was talking about Celtic conquest. I was talking about how there's 2 different leaders, named Brennus. One conquered Rome in 390 BC. The other sacked Delphi in Greece in the 270s BC. And you know, during that time, there's still Celts on both sides of the Alps, and somewhat in Italy. But slowly, the Romans take that back, little by little. And they push the Gaul. They either make the Gauls or the Celts their allies, they're their little bitches, or they fucking attack them, sack them, and push them back. But either way, Caesar comes. We're now going down to, 276 BC was when we last left off. During the Punic Wars, which lasted between 240 to about 150 BC. There were 3 Punic Wars. The second one is where Hannibal fought in, and Hannibal had Celts on his side. The Romans, Hannibal's enemy was Scipio Africanus. That was the Roman he had to fight against. He had Celts on his side. The Celts were hiring themselves out as mercenaries. They were becoming Romanized. They were starting to get into civilization and dig it. So, and that happens so often. In America, we do that to our neighbors and our enemies. We give them McDonald's and blue jeans and Reeboks, and then they become American. Well, that's how republics work. I'm going to say that's how republics work a bunch of times today, because I'm telling you, there's so many instances where Rome is so much like America, it's not even funny. So, all right, so we're getting around down to like the 70 to 60 BC, and you suddenly have Julius Caesar on the scene. Now, the more research that I did on Julius Caesar, I always thought he was like a Hitler. Like, he was about murdering, killing, making himself look good, Roman conquests, and victory, victory, victory. Like, he wasn't that. I thought he was a rich man. He was from a patrician family, but actually he grew up poor. When Caesar was young, when he was 15, his dad died, and like there was this big the patricians in Rome were like killing each other. They were putting prices on each other's heads for political reasons, and wiping each other out, murdering each other for money. So Caesar hid in Spain when he was a teenager, and would stay there until he was in his 20s. Now, when he was in his 20s, a guy named Marius united the Roman army, okay? And he made a lot of sweeping changes, and one of those changes was that you didn't have to be rich. Before Marius came along, you had to be a patrician, you had to be a rich boy in order to be in a legion. He made it so that anybody, no matter how broke you are, as long as you're a Roman citizen, you can fight in a legion. It was a big deal for the time. And his protege, Caesar, came up under this Marius. So Marius was a man for the people, and Caesar was a lot. I mean, the closest thing, the more I learn about him, the more he's like a Kennedy. Like, he had the people on his side. The people loved Caesar. And as he grew older and he got more involved with the army, the way he won, the way he fought, the way he took chances, risks, and gambles, and always came out on top. He just kept giving, and he kept giving money and food and bread and all this shit to the Roman people. So they loved him. He could do no wrong. So by the time Caesar's moving up, he eventually makes some moves, and he gets together with a dude named Crassus, who's mad rich, and a dude named Pompey, who's like a conservative. He's kind of like the John McCain of ancient Rome. One of those like guys who's like not necessarily the president, but he's pulling all the strings and he's got all kinds of power. Caesar got with those two guys, and with them came enough power and financial backing to start really like hammering down on this Gaul, this what we now call modern France. That was the Celtic heartland, and he started out doing it by, now another thing that was happening was that the Celts they were never unified. They never thought of themselves as a nation. The best way to think of the Celts in the Iron Age is think of them like the Native Americans in America. Like, there were many tribes. They fought amongst each other. They never really got along. And when somebody who was organized, aka the Romans, came along, they just like could make them fight against each other half the time. Or they could like use all these excuses like, well, this tribe is our allies and you're not, and you pissed them off, so now we're gonna attack you and take all your shit. They did that over and over and over. And that's exactly what Caesar did. There was a tribe in Switzerland called the Helvetii. Okay, and they were kind of indigenous to Switzerland, but Germans were moving in, and Caesar was one of the first people to use the word Germans and differentiate them from Celts. We still don't know if the Germans he spoke of really were Celts, or if there was some sort of real big, huge ethnical difference. We just don't know, but people were moving in, and they were calling them Germans into Switzerland, and there was a little bit of climate change going on, so these Helvetii, and if you go to Switzerland today, they still call themselves the Helvetian Republic. They're moving west, okay? And this caused problems because west of Switzerland, in Gaul, the Romans had allies. I think they were called the Sinones. And they're like, hey, Caesar, these guys are these guys are trying to move into our turf. So what Caesar did was told the Helvetii, you can't move in there. And they said, well, we're going to. So he marched into their territory and sacked like 12 of their villages. The Celtic villages were usually, the Romans referred to them as oppida, or hill forts, basically. And they were not really cities proper. They were just glorified camps in a lot of ways, fortified camps. And slowly but surely, Caesar starts using, Caesar had like 10 legions in Gaul on the other side of the Alps, and he starts using this as like kind of, he can do what he wants. And he starts attacking anyone who doesn't go along with him. And he's moving all around France. He's in northern France. It's probably about, I'm gonna say this is happening between 58 and 50 BC. It takes about 8 to 10 years for this all to happen, this whole entire war. All right, so the Celts are, again, they're not unified, but they all get together and all the tribes unite during the winter of, I think, 57 BC, and they say, what the hell are we gonna do? They're gonna take us over. The Romans are talking conquest, and we're not gonna stand for it. So they resolve that, look, we're gonna finally, the first guy that was a king that rebelled against Caesar was a guy named Ambiorix, and he called this meeting. Anytime you see R-I-X on the end of a name, Rix is the same word as Rex, R-E-X, same word as Raj in India. It all means king, all right? Ambiorix gets all the tribes together, and up steps, he's like, we gotta do this, we gotta unite. And unify, in this meeting, a dude who was he served time in in a Roman, as a cavalryman in the Roman legion. And by now, the Celts, in the first part of my series, Celts only had chariots. By now, they have cavalry. By this time in the game, and by the time Caesar's coming, the Celts are mostly fighting on chariots and on cavalry. And of course, the Romans are fighting in infantry. They're fighting with legions. But this guy steps up, and his name is Vercingetorix. His dad was kind of a big guy in the Celtic world, and he was the heir apparent. So he said, you know what, I'm going to do this. Let's unite. Let's fight back. Let's start a war of attrition. Caesar's in the north. Let's draw him into as far into the forests of Gaul as we can, into the middle of the heartland of Gaul, and then deny him of everything, food, water, anything we can, and then fucking hammer him. So that was the plan. And they started hitting, this Vercingetorix starts hitting, picking off Romans left and right. And when they're moving, especially, is when they're most vulnerable. When they're fortified, it's hard to hit them. So they're trying to make the Romans move, and they're trying to get the Romans, you know, off kilter. Eventually, the Romans are chasing him down. They're coming at him. And the first battle happens in a hill fort, an oppida called Avoricum. Avoricum. And that's in south central Gaul. It's kind of like right in the middle almost. And this was a fort that was surrounded on three sides by swamp. There was only one side that had steady ground. The Romans took that ground, and it was one of these, and you know, Caesar had these, it was acrobatic tactics. Like, he basically fortified in front of this town and started building ramps and walls to get over the city walls. The Celts are shooting back at them. The Romans are, you know, taking the fire and still building. This war is going to be won not so much by swords, not so much by tactics, but by bulldozers and constructions, and the fact that the Romans could like build bridges and fences and buildings in just days. Like, they were really good. They never stopped working. They were like a construction team as well as a well-fighting army unit. So the Celts are trying to dig underneath their city walls and get into underneath the Romans and make all their like ramps and shit fall. And they started burning them from underneath. Somehow the Romans stopped that. They fucking get over the top of the wall. Vercingetorix is on the outside of the city. There's Celts come, and every time that the Romans try to sack or a town, it's you know, and starve it out. There's Celts on the inside of the town, and then there's Celts attacking the Romans from the outside, and they have to defend themselves both ways. What's up, brother? All right, so eventually the Romans take Avoricum. They sack the city, pretty much massacre all the men. The women all become slaves, children, etc. That's battle number one. Now the next battle is at Bibracta. Vercingetorix caught the Romans with their pants down. Bibracta's not so much a hill fort, but a territory where the Romans were camped out. They beat the shit out of them, but Caesar wasn't there. There was like 2 or 3 legions that went down and got decimated. So that was a victory for Vercingetorix. He won the day, and the Celts had another victory under their belt. So Caesar's pissed, and he's like, I'm gonna nip this shit in the bud. And he's real pissed at Vercingetorix. He's mad because somebody's starting to beat him at his own game. And they're burning the Romans are marching, and they're being deprived of food. They're having to eat, like, resort to cannibalism, and they're barely hanging on. The weather was not cooperating. The whole time at Avoricum, it rained, it was shitty, it was mud, it sucked to be a Roman soldier through all of this. So they hit a city called, or a hill fort, an oppida called Gregovia. And that is Vercingetorix's hometown. And like, this was a punch in the nuts to the Celts. He sacked that city. The Romans sacked that city. They take it. Mass murder, slavery, the whole nine. Basically, when they would sack a city, every single Roman soldier would get to take a prisoner as a slave. Getting a slave, it doesn't sound like much. It's like, well, you get a free guy. That's like getting a fucking brand new, it's almost somewhere between a new car and a new house in our economy. Like, it's that expensive. It's that worth that much money. Somebody to do your work for the rest of your life for free, that's huge. So a lot of slavery, a lot of slaves taken. Finally, Vercingetorix escapes from the Battle of Gergovia. He reunites as many Celts as he can, and they hole up, and this was close to Paris, where Paris is now. It's kind of north-central Gaul, in a city called Alesia. And this is where Caesar really shines, because, all right, he comes in the city's fortified, so he's gonna starve it out. He puts his troops all around, surrounds the city. No one can get out of the town. And then he builds a wall. They build a wall. But Celts start coming from every direction from the outside and start hitting the Romans from the outside. So Caesar, in typical Roman fashion, legionary fashion, builds a second wall on the outside of himself. So he's in this little, the Romans, thousands, tens of thousands of Roman troops are like holed up in this little sliver, this little corridor around the city of, or the town of Alesia. And you know, they're trying to, there's enemies on the inside of this circle that he's made. There's enemies on the outside of it. And he's fighting on both sides. The Romans are fighting on both sides. They're getting hit, they're getting picked off, they're starving. Eventually they come up with the idea to poison the water supply, and the city falls. The Romans do hold off against the invading Celts from the outside. Once Alesia goes, Vercingetorix is inside it, and he gives up, and he's taken prisoner, and for 6 years he's a prisoner of Caesar as he's getting dragged around Gaul. Caesar ends up wiping up the rest of what's now called France and a lot of Belgium, and making that in Gaul into a Roman territory. And from then on in, that was the Celtic heartland. There was millions of Celts. Supposedly now, Plutarch is the only guy who did a tabulation. He says over 1 million people died, Celts or Gauls died, and then at least twice as many were made into slaves. I think the numbers are higher, but you know, that's pretty impressive for Iron Age conquering. Like, you know, in the 20th century, Hitler slaughtered how many millions? Like, Stalin's slaughtered how many millions? And that's in the 20th century. There's a lot more people now than there was back then. So, from then on in, the main thing to understand about Vercingetorix is that, aside from his great name, I love that name. That's my #1 name for a boy. I wanted to name my child that. That got vetoed. And if I do ever have a really cool chick that I have a girl, a baby with, and it's a boy, I'm going to push for the name Vercingetorix again. It just looks good on paper, and you know, the big thing about this guy is he almost did it. He almost united all the Celts. He almost made a Celtic nation. He almost defeated Julius Caesar. He had Caesar up against the ropes. It was a good match, and I didn't really do any justice to like explain the war today, but I want to get through this Celtic series. So from that point on, but when Caesar conquers Gaul, I think it's 50 BC by the time he does it. So, I mean, Caesar dies 6 years later. He's killed by his own senators. He gets his, but he does go on to try to attack Britain, but the Romans really suck at navigating and being sailors and doing the whole marine warfare thing, amphibious attacks. So Caesar never goes on to conquer Britain. That happens later on during the reign of Emperor Claudius. But from then on in, pretty much the Celts from this point on, it's a downward spiral for the Celts, man. I'm going to end the show there today. I hope you guys have a great day. Again, expect my next show. It's going to be on Boadicea, one of the Celtic queens of the Iceni tribe in Britain. And from then on, after that, we're going to talk about medieval and into modern Celts, and up to today and hopefully the future of Celtz. Have a great day. My name is Richie Romance. Peace. Remember, stay alert, look alive, and act like you know. Right there's my partner in crime, Orlando Gonzalez, but we all call him OG. Peace.